Okay, we are going to be learning to understand translation of functions. So this will be working from 7a. So the first thing I want us to think about with the translation is it's focusing on horizontal and vertical shift. So horizontal shift is affecting our x value. So that's the reason why we've got x plus h for our image, because the h is that horizontal shift. Likewise, k is a vertical shift, so that's it's affecting the y value. So we got y plus k, which will be our image of y. So we've got a few types of translation here. So first thing I would like us to think about is when I've got xy and it's mapping to x plus 3y. So this means it is going to be moving to the right, which is what we've got up here. X plus h is moving towards the right. So that means we're moving towards the right by 3 places, and that is where we get our new point of x is 1, y is 2. So the image of x is equal to x plus 3. And the image of y stays as y. If we look at this next point where we've got x, y mapped to x plus 4, y plus 2. So the image of x is x plus 4 and the image of y is y plus 2. So the first thing we're going to do, we'll go across by 4 and then we're going to go up by 2 to get to our new point. We can label that as the image of x and y, which is 1 and 1. So when we are describing the translation that maps the first point to the second point and provide a rule. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I can draw a picture. I can look at what is going on with my x's to get 3 to 7. And what am I doing with -2 to get -2 to 5? So to get x's 3 to 7, I'm adding 4. And then to go from -2 to 5, I'm adding 7. So this is a horizontal shift by 4 units in the positive direction of the x-axis and 7 units in the positive direction of the y-axis. We are able to map this by saying the image of x is x plus 4 and the image of y is y plus 7. If we look at the next part, which is says -4, 6 to 1, -3. Same thing applies. I can just look at my x values and go, what am I doing to -4 to get it to 1? I have to plus 5. What do I need to do to 6 to get to -3? I'm going down by 9. I can do it visually with drawing those two and drawing as a right angled triangle and thinking about it that I'm looking at the rise and run. So from this, I can then write it in words. There's a translation of 5 units in the positive direction of the x-axis. And there is a 9-unit translation in the negative direction of the y-axis. I can map this. So my new x value will be x plus 5 and my new y value will be y take away 9. If I'm going to find a rule and it says translate f of x is equal to square root x by 3 units in the positive direction of the x-axis and 2 units in the positive direction of the y-axis. So the first thing I want us to be able to do here is I'm going to think about this square root x as putting in h and putting in k. What is what are they meaning, the h and k? H is referring to the horizontal shift and K is referring to the vertical shift. So here it's got by 3 units in the positive direction of the x-axis. So that means h must be 3. So that will be x take away 3. And 2 units in the positive direction of the y-axis. So that means this k is going to push the graph up by 2, so it'll be 2. If I look at the next question, we're going to translate f of x is equal to x squared by 2 units in the negative direction of the x-axis and 4 units in the negative direction of the y-axis. So I'm going to start off with my basic graph with h and k. H is talking about my horizontal shift, and that's 2. And it's 2 units in the negative direction, so h will be -2. So this will turn into x plus 2. And 4 units down, so k will be -4. Okay, so we're going to find the rule. Translate f of x is equal to 1 over x by 4 units in the negative direction of the x-axis and 1 unit in the positive direction of the y-axis. So the first thing I'm going to look at rewriting this with h and k. So 1 over x will turn into 1 over x minus h plus k. So the next part we are going to look at, it's saying 4 units in the negative direction. To get into the negative direction, it will be h will be -4, which means it will be x plus 4. A vertical shift of 1 unit up, k must be +1. So we're repeating exactly what we've done previously. It's just using all of our graphs now. So translate f of x is equal to x squared by 5 units in the negative direction of the x-axis and 2 units in the negative direction of the y-axis. So first I'm going to look at my basic form, which is having a h and having a k. It's going 5 units in the negative direction, so h must be -5, and 2 units in the negative direction of the y, so k will be -2. So based on what we've done, we're going to connect it to a different form. So what you'll notice is if it's affecting our horizontal, it's going to be affecting x, which is why it's in the bracket here. If we are talking about vertical, it's always going to be on the outside of f of x. So for f of x is equal to 1 over x, sketch the graph of each of the following, labeling asymptotes and axis intercepts. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to rewrite this. So this means x minus 4, I substitute that into my x, and I've got +2 on the outside of my function. And that's because this is my y value, and then I'm adding 2 and pushing it up. Now, to graph, I need to identify x-intercepts. So x-intercepts mean y equals 0. I will take 2 on both sides. I will times by x minus 4 to get rid of the fraction. I will expand my bracket. And then I'll take away 8 from both sides, and I will divide by -2. So now I've got my x-intercept. I'm going to identify the y-intercept, and to do that, I make x equals 0, and that gives me -9 over 4. When we graph, make sure we put our asymptotes, and we know the asymptotes will be x is 4 because it can't equal 4, and y equals 2. So I've got all of my intercepts labeled as a coordinate. Let's look at this next question. For f of x is equal to 1 over x, sketch the graph of each of the following, labeling the asymptotes and axis intercepts. We've got y is equal to f of x, take away 5. Again, I rewrite it in f of x form. So nothing changing with 1 over x, but I've got take away 5 on the end. I need to identify x and y intercepts. So x-intercepts, I know y equals 0. I then solve for x, so I add 5 to both sides. I times both sides by x, and I divide by 5. So that gives me x is equal to 1 over 5. In terms of a y-intercept, I currently have an asymptote at y equals, a asymptote at x equals 0. So I can't have x equals 0 here, which is why when I graph it, you can see that there's no y-intercept. Okay, last one that we'll do, if I've got 1 over x for my f of x, and this time it's wanting me to have a negative out the front, so that's reflection, and I'm going to substitute x plus 3 in. So if I rewrite that, I substitute x plus 3 in for x, and I've got a negative on the outside. So again, I'm just going to identify the y-intercept here. The y-intercept is when x equals 0. So I make x 0 and I solve. Now, the next part I'm going to look for is I'm going to look for the x-intercept. Now, because there's no horizontal shift, the x-intercept will be none because I will have y equals 0 as a asymptote. So now I just put those points on. I've got my point here for this line, and I've got my two asymptotes.